thank you all for coming to our presentation today by David Lee, who is the CEO of Sober Solutions. Our program today is called What Can You Say to Get Them to Quit? About a month ago, Robin McGarrigle and Brenda Chalukas went to training and saw David Lee's presentation, and they came back and said, we really need him to speak to our probation officers, our volunteers, our mentors, our interns, our court staff regarding substance abuse issues. And so we want to thank him for coming all the way from Indiana to do this for us and to present for us. But before we get started, I do want to say thank you to our technology division. They put a lot of work in here to get here, set up all the equipment so that we can broadcast out to juvenile. People out at juvenile, say hello. And also to videotape this for those that couldn't be here today. So thank you to Technology Division, Winnie and gang, on all the hard work you did. Wave to us so we can see you. Thank you. So let me start. David Lee is the founder of the Indiana-based Intervention Services Incorporated, which is one of the largest intervention service providers in North America. He has more than 12 years experience in intervention, addiction counseling, family systems, and recovery. His professional background includes development of the SMART model of interventions, and he is CEO of Sober Solutions. So I will turn all this over to David so I can sit down and enjoy the presentation. And thanks everyone for coming.
Hello everybody, and in case you didn't catch, the title of our presentation is actually Why Families Wait. So we did that to see who was paying attention. And as she said, my name is David Lee, and I own an intervention company, and I've been an interventionist for a while. And we also operate an agency that is a referral agency, and we process about 12,000 inquiries a year. People that are looking for treatment or people that have somebody who is resistant to treatment, and our primary focus, or my primary focus, is interventions. And it's a great honor to be here. I'm pretty sure, years and years, I'm in recovery myself, I'm pretty sure 20 years ago somebody sat me down and said, if you don't change your ways, you're going to end up spending the rest of your life in front of judges, probation officers, and attorneys. And I guess here we are. So it turned out that way, so for better or for worse than that. It really is an honor. I mean, I've done this in front of a lot of probation departments in Indiana, and it's one of they seem to understand interventions because judges are interventionists. One of the rare situations where an outside source comes in and somebody's behaving in a particular manner, and we try to change some of the outside to help change the inside. It's an honor to do what I do. It's one of the rare jobs where you can say or do something to somebody that changed their life forever. And I know that from a personal standpoint because I had a lot of people that spent time trying to help me along the way. So again, the title is Why Families Wait. And I usually like to start with my first intervention that I ever did. An intervention, a family reaches out. I was working at a treatment program, and they had this family that had an addict son. He was 35 years old, crack cocaine, and he wanted to come, but he had spent 6 months saying, I want to come, but not today. I want to come, but not today. So he was stuck. And the family said, would there be any way that you could have somebody come out and talk to them? And I was pretty good at working with resistant clients, and they offered me this opportunity. I had no real training in interventions. And I was like, sure. It's like I got on a plane and flew to New York, and I spent all day with this family. We talked about enabling and some of the things that they were paying those bills and doing all this stuff, and about 8 hours. And then we came up with this rudimentary treatment plan, which was going to be a residential program plus 6 months at a halfway house. Essentially, he was foreclosing on his home. His power had been shut off, and he was sitting in candlelight, not eating for days. And he was in a kind of a paranoid psychosis. He was convinced that white panel vans were following him around and camped out outside, and they, being the FBI, I guess, were always going to come in and get him. So, bad situation. He was just stuck. Went to bed, woke up the next morning, and we went over to his house and lit some candles. It was the morning, it was dark. pulled the curtains back, lit some candles. He was kind of passed out on the couch, and we woke him up, and the family read some simple letters, and I told him a little bit about my story, and we talked about this idea of treatment, and he was a little resistant, and then said, you know what, I want to do it. You know, I want to do it. And I thought, wow, 5 minutes, like really, this is, you know, and they've been struggling for a long time trying to get him to go. And I thought, what a magical thing, you know, bringing this family together and talking to him and creating this thing, what a cool thing. And the family hugged and they cried, and it was this thing, and I was like, wow, this is pretty neat. And I excused myself to go use the restroom. Went to the restroom, came out maybe 5 minutes later, and they were now all in the kitchen, and the father was sharing a beer with his son to celebrate his going into treatment. I had forgotten to mention, don't drink with the alcoholic addict before you go, but you know, neither here nor there. And they looked at me and they said, we have a better idea. And I was just gone for 5 minutes. They said, well, what better idea? And they said, instead of going with you and going into this kind of treatment program far away, we think it best if he gets plugged back in with a therapist and goes to a local outpatient program here. We're going to pay off his foreclosure so that he doesn't have to lose his home, and this way we can be a part of his recovery, etc. And I said, well, what happened to this, like the what happened? And they circled around him and got extremely upset with me, very antagonistic, and we almost started, we started arguing, and they basically threw me out of their home. Thank you for your services, you need to get out of here right now. And I learned a couple things in that, which led eventually, several years later, to this presentation. The two most important things that I learned: number one, if you ever do an intervention, never use the restroom, apparently. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that a family in conjunction with an addict can undo in 5 minutes what you spend months or hours or days or weeks to do. And those of you that have any experience working with people that are substance abusers will kind of figure that out. You know, that a lot of times in conjunction with the family, they're working against you. And we ran into some interesting things, and this kind of led to the development of this. And we learned a lot of different things. I speak from a different perspective. This whole presentation is really about looking at addiction and recovery and enabling and family systems in a different way. I like to share the story about, there's the Hindu story about the king and the 5 wise blind men. I don't know if you know the story. Basically, there's a king, there's an elephant traipsing around, and they didn't know it was an elephant, and the king sent out his 5 wisest men. They were all blind, to go and figure out what this thing was, traipsing through the jungle. And they all come back, and they all have a different story. And the one who had felt the side said, it's like a wall. And the one who had felt the leg said, it's like a big tree trunk walking through the woods. Another one had felt the tail, it's like a snake. Somebody else had felt the trunk and said it's like something else, a branch. So they all were feeling the exact same thing, but they were looking at different sides of the same thing. So what I like to do is present an emotional model of addiction and recovery, because I think addiction is really about emotions. And it doesn't supplant any of the other models. To give you an example of why we kind of do this is that when I do an intervention, for example, my family intervened on me, and if you looked at my family system, they were all believers in different models. A model is a descriptor of the way something functions. And they were all right in their own way, but they were not on the same page. For example, my mother was a diehard believer in the disease model. She could go back through the hierarchy of our family systems and explain why 700 years ago my alcoholic great-great-great-great-grandfather led to genetically me. I mean, she really knew it. She was a firm believer in clinicians and therapy, and she just felt that if only I could find that right insight-oriented therapy or something, it could fix me. Now, my dad, on the other side, my dad was absolutely not a believer in the disease model of addiction and recovery. He was a firm believer in the get a damn job and quit doing drugs form of recovery, and nothing could convince him of otherwise. And he drank excessively, a combat veteran, and one day he quit. And he would tell me, this is what you do. And his program of recovery is pretty neat. He's sober about 20 years, and he'd say, here's what you do, David. And he'd say, every time I think about having a drink, I tell myself, Dennis, just don't drink. And I was like, well, that's great. I mean, it would be it's kind of the crappiest program I've ever heard. But, it works awesome for him. And it absolutely, he believes in it, and it works really, really well for me as a great life. My brother believes in more of a punitive style of addiction recovery. His belief system was, you need to quit enabling David and you need to kick him out. And once he loses everything and crashes and burns, goes to jail, gets arrested, and sooner or later he'll learn his lesson, and this is how he'll recover. My grandmother was a strong believer in a faith-based model of addiction and recovery. She was devout and religious, and she believed that it was spiritual warfare and that the adversary had gotten really a hold of me. And that until I was willing to humbly hit my knees and accept Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior, I was going to lose. So we had all these family members that all have kind of different models, a way of looking at my problem, but nobody is on the same page. And this is part of the problem, is that they all recognized this problem, but none of them were on the same page. And they were all kind of right in their own way. But until a family can come together and everybody can get into agreement. So our model is really just a way of looking at addiction so that the faith-based person and the disease model, as well as the punitive, as everybody can come together and get into some form of agreement and look at the situation in a way that can help both the family and the addict. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on this. Again, the title is Why Families Wait. This is a Prezi presentation, so it kind of spirals a little bit. Essentially, every day families reach out to us for help with somebody in their lives who's suffering from addiction or abuse. And again, like I said, we get about 10 to 12,000 inquiries a year. And as a result, we're a pretty large company. We do tracking and trending. I can tell you how many 25-year-old clients from New Jersey are on heroin that reach out to us, those kind of things. So over time, we started to generate these statistics, and we started to kind of run into and discover some fascinating things. Of the people that call us, they usually say about the same thing. They say, I've got family members using drugs or alcohol or other behaviors. It's getting worse. I'm afraid they might die. I can't take this anymore. Please, please help me. And they always say, I'll do anything to help. I'll do anything except the unspoken, unless it's something you suggest that involves change. And any of you that have worked with family systems will know that the unspoken, I'll do anything unless it's something that suggests change, is pretty true. And this isn't like a props for you. This is just generally speaking, if you were to come out and gather the entire family together, and the entire family was to agree to offer somebody treatment, and a professional such as yourself were present to kind of mediate this entire thing, and we had a treatment plan lined out, and we had consequences of if they choose not to, generally speaking, 90% of people will agree to go to treatment. Now, some of those numbers change, like meth addicts are a lot crazier. That number is less for meth addicts. Heroin addicts are pretty compliant. They're pretty easy to get into treatment. They're hard to get into long-term recovery, but they're easy to get their agreement because their life kind of sucks every day. Every morning at 7 a.m. their life sucks. So 90% of professional interventions result in a client agreeing to enter into treatment. But of the families we talk to that have the financial means, the ability, whatever it is, whether they have insurance or whatever it is, less than 10% of families agree to do an intervention, which is an interesting thing. If I had 10 families of 10, 25-year-old kids, because heroin's like the big thing right now. It's a big thing. You know, it's hitting all classes right now. But let's say, take a family that got enough insurance to be able to afford to put their kid, a 25-year-old kid, into treatment. Let's say they've got the means or ability to kind of do an intervention. Of those 10, only 1 out of those 10 will agree to do an intervention, no matter what we do. And of those 10, if all 10 of them, their kid had just overdosed a week before and was in the ER, only 1 out of 10 would agree to do an intervention and probably treatment. And it's a fascinating statistic. And we have spent the last 10 or 12 years trying to figure out the why, which is, why is it that no matter what, families wait to do this intervention? What is it? What's going on within that family system? And that's what this whole thing is really dedicated to. What's interesting about this whole statistic right here is this means that it is easier to talk a defiant, unwilling addict in denial into going into treatment than it is to convince a family to let us do it. It is, everybody focuses on that addict. If that addict would change, let's focus on the addict changing. And I'm telling you right now that it is easier for me to get an addict to commit to a treatment program than it is to get a family to commit to confronting the addict to get them to go into treatment. And there's reasons for it. So why? And this isn't really like a business, but I want you to understand, I started this as a guy in recovery. I wasn't a business person. There were so many things we did wrong. We didn't know. There are really no major intervention companies out there. We're one of the few. So when I say we're the largest, there's not very many. There's a lot of solo practitioners, solo therapists. So as we grew, business-wise, we didn't really know. We made a lot of mistakes. But I want you to understand that we tried everything to change that statistic, to try to get families to be more interested into truly confronting the addiction, instead of saying to you, I'll do anything for it to change, but not today. Just like an addict. Families start sounding a lot like an addict. You talk to a heroin addict, I will absolutely go to treatment, just not today. I will absolutely become my addict, just not today. So here's some ideas we tried. We didn't really do buy one, get one free, but marketing. So I didn't understand anything about marketing, but this intervention TV show comes out. I don't know if you remember it, Ken Seeley and all these things, and we thought, wow, it explains everything. It shows people, and a few amazing things happened. We started as a result of the show. We started to get calls from addicts asking for interventions, which is the bizarrest thing in the world. They would have an addict who would be like, hey, I'm addicted to heroin and stuff like that. I would like to have you call my family so they could do an intervention on me. And I would say, well, if you're willing, we can help you to find a treatment program. They say, no. What, that show thing where they read the letters, I think it would be really important if we did that. And we're like, okay, I guess we'll call your mom and ask her to do an intervention. So that was fascinating, but the statistics didn't change. And knowing a lot of the other intervention providers, they're all in agreement with me that about 1 in 10 that have the means and ability will agree to do an intervention, will agree to confront their addict in a somewhat professional, stable, loving way. Sales. We thought, well, maybe, I'm just a guy in recovery. I didn't have any experience in sales. Maybe what we're missing is there's something we're not doing. So what if we talk to some people, because I'm known in my office as a long talker. If a family calls me and I give them advice free or anything like that, they're 2 hours. People are like, you're talking too long to people. And I'm like, well, I like talking to people. So we thought, well, why don't we put an ad out, a little Craigslist ad, for a salesperson and get some suggestions. So we put this little ad out, and not knowing anything about sales, and we got this guy. And if you ever run into a sales guy, they look like that. They come into your office and they're like, yay, I'm going to try. And they were a little arrogant, and what's interesting is that they believed that they understood our world of addiction, recovery, and treatment better than anybody, even though they didn't have any experience. And he walked into our office and talked about how he was going to transform everything, and he was going to help us to understand why these families weren't agreeing to do interventions, and blah, blah, blah. And within a few months, he looked like that. And then a little bit later, this is my 2-week notice, Eric. And what I love about this is I believe it's on a bar napkin, which is pretty cool. He couldn't do it because the interesting thing about our industry is that almost everything works in terms of opposites. Is that what you think is the right way is really the opposite way. For example, families think that if I help my addict, it's going to help them to recover, and often it is the opposite. When they stop helping, they get better. So recovery is often in terms of opposites. And this guy kind of left. So we thought maybe our staff, I've got about 30 staff members. I've got a mix of people in recovery, people outside of recovery. But we literally, everybody that comes into my office has an opportunity to talk. They do follow-up, and they call old families, no matter whether they're secretaries or whatever have you. And I have Al-Anon members and things like that. And basically, what's sad about that is we do it for 2 reasons. One, so that they can understand how difficult it is with the family systems. But the other part is because statistically, when you call back a client and go back 6 months, you'll usually find ones that have passed away. And it's important to realize the nature of what it is that we're doing. And a lot of people would think that heroin addicts are the ones that pass away a lot. In our situation, it's alcohol. And there's a reason for that, is that because by the time somebody calls an outside source for alcoholism, their alcoholic is probably a late-stage acute alcoholic. And which means there's all kinds of medical complications along with that. And in many cases, they're 6 months away from death. And so a lot of times we get those calls, but we put everybody, we put addicts, non-addicts, recovering, Al-Anon. I have therapists that have gone on phones, and nothing that we could do. Nothing changes that number. Education, I thought maybe they just don't understand what interventions are really about. And when we finally discovered what the blocks were, what the problems were, I decided I was going to explain to families why it was. And I'll give you an example. Here's an interesting statistic. If a family member, if an addict, that somebody calls to intervene, an addict or an alcoholic, if they've been married for over 10 years, it's less than 10%. It's almost 1% chance that that family will do an intervention. What a strange thing. Why would that be, right? And I'll explain it to you by the end of this. And so we figured this out, and we began to explain it. I'll give you an example. I had somebody that called alcohol for their brother. Their brother was about 40 years old, late-stage acute alcoholic, and he was probably going to die within a year. And they reached out to us, and I explained to them, or I asked them a few questions. Oh, he's been married for about 17 years, wife loves him, they're successful, blah, blah, blah. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to explain to you why this intervention is never going to happen. And I spent an hour explaining to them the dynamics of what I'm going to be talking about here. And they understood it, they agreed with it, and said to me, I agree with everything, but would you be willing to talk to his wife? Absolutely. I then spent an hour speaking with the wife, and I explained everything I'm going to explain to you in this. And she understood it and agreed with everything, the science behind it, agreed with all of it, and said, I want to do this intervention. I want to. And I know that you're not going to believe me on this, but we can't do it right now because next month we have our annual trip to Hawaii planned, and I don't want to rob him of that. But I swear to you, on my grandmother's life, that we will do this intervention when we get back. And of course, did we ever hear from her again? Unanswered calls, things like that. She in her heart, just like a heroin addict, knew in her heart that tomorrow we were going to do this intervention. And probably to this day still hasn't. So education, intervention 101. Fortune cookie, you will not schedule this intervention, no matter what I've tried, no matter what we tried, we wouldn't budge these numbers. Everybody says cost. Cost is that insurance does not cover interventions because who's the client? Is the family, is the addict? You can't bill insurance on a normal client. We at one time decided to offer free interventions. On occasion, I still will, but we had it mandatory for every interventionist had to do at least one free intervention to give back to the community and things like that. In some of the classes I've taken, they said, don't ever, when you do free, if they're not vested, you're really going to struggle with it. But we decided we were going to do it anyway, and it didn't change our numbers one bit. You know how frustrating it is to try to give away a free intervention when only 1 in 10 families will agree to do it? I'll give you another example. There was a Chicago firefighter family. They had the insurance. They had great insurance. They had the ability, the means, everything, a great, strong family. I mean, this was a family that hung together. When one of us gets cut, all of us bleed. That was their... So there was a late-stage acute alcoholic firefighter, which is common with firefighters. You know, they get, 2 days on, 3 days off, and partied up and stuff like that. So this was a situation, but they were really hitting on cost. Well, because of the economy and things like that. And so finally I said, well, I'll tell you what, I will come and do it for free. Don't worry about it. You know, I mean, this guy's in trouble, I'll do it. Really? Absolutely. You want to do this, we'll do this. Give me the day. Oh, well, let me talk to the family and I'll get back with you. Nothing, no call back. I called up 15 messages. Disappeared off the face of this earth. They will say it's cost, but it isn't cost. It's always another reason. They don't even know the reason. So, we'll perform interventions for food. I thought it was kind of cool. So families. So the problem and the solution seems to lie somewhere within the families itself, or themselves. This is the Brady Bunch here. I've always been suspicious of Dallas there. I don't know why. So, he's up to no good or something. So, it's within the family system. It is easy to blame that. Let's focus all our energy on that addict, that addict, that addict. But I am here to tell you that the family system itself is part of the problem. So here's just, 3 classic examples of types of people that we intervene on. There's a lot more than that, but I'm just giving you 3 examples because these 3 people all have similar characteristics, even though they don't look like it. And these 3 people all have some things in common. And ironically, those that you encounter, addicts, they will all have some attributes all in common, whether they are sober or whether they are high. And it's important to kind of know those things and look at the why. Because a lot of times we recognize why do addicts behave the way that they do. This is just a different way of looking at it. So the first type of person, and we're getting a lot more of these calls, and they're the failure to launch people. Failure to Launch was a movie with Matthew McConaughey. It was basically about a guy who refused to leave his mother's home. He was stuck there. He was just living there. And we've been getting more and more calls on this. I've been getting calls from family members of non-addicts. They're like, my kid is a bum. He's 28 years old. He plays Xbox all day. He won't get a job. Can you come out here? And I'm like, well, I could, but I don't know where we put him. There's no bum rehab. If you want to start a rough bum rehab, you will retire. I know if you create that, because there is a need for it right now. My family would have loved to put me in the bum rehab when I was in my early 20s. But the failure to launch people, I got to change that number. It used to be 30 to 50. Now those numbers are changing. 25, 22. We're getting a lot of younger people. Before we were getting older people that were stuck. They were usually marijuana or other things, drinking, stuck at home. It's really fascinating when you get a 50-year-old addict, because you'll get a call from like a 70-year-old woman who's like, my son, he's been living with me for 50 years and he won't get a job, and I'm like, okay, live with his parents, and the family is always like, I'm just sick of this, I'm sick and tired. There may or may not be any major crisis. It's just it's been going on for so long. They're usually unemployed and just kind of stuck in their life. They're not moving forward. They're not progressing in their life. And this is what the family is talking about. But if you kind of we'll get into, well, why don't they get a job? Maybe you should kick them out. Then all of a sudden, the family gets very defensive. Well, they're, the economy, they're misunderstood. You don't understand. Well, the reason he divorced his last 9 wives is because they were all the problem. Things like that. So they're very defensive on them. Next one. Well, most people think of an intervention as the major crisis ones. A lot of times it's a precipitating event. An arrest, an overdose is more and more common with the heroin and the opiates. Now with the synthetics, we're getting the psychotic breaks, which is really crazy. You get 19-year-old kids that are using synthetic marijuana and having full-blown psychoses. So we'll get those kind of things. Sometimes families are confused. Are they bipolar? Are they not? Things are different today. Things are way, way different than when I was younger. But usually there's a singular event and they're panic-stricken. But I'm going to tell you right now, if 10 kids overdose and 10 families call me, only one of those is going to be willing for us to come in and fix this. And you may think otherwise, but it's the most frustrating thing in the world when you get a phone call from a father who says, my kid just flatlined yesterday, what can I do? When we talk about treatment, we talk about intervention. When you call them back 2 days later, they say, we have decided against treatment. We've decided against this intervention because I just spoke with my son, and he looked me in the eye, and he swore to me he would never use again. And when you call him back 3 months later for a follow-up and his son is dead, it's a real bad call. You can't say, I told you so, or you should have. All you can say is, I'm sorry to hear that. So the next one is a guy called Mr. Cool. They're not really long hair anymore. They're kind of the misfits, that kind of thing. They're the polysubstance abusers. Many failed attempts at treatment. You guys run into them, into jail, out of jail, into jail, out of jail. Many failed intervention attempts. Chronic relapser, good at treatment, bad in sobriety. I know this guy really, really well because that's actually a picture of me at the age of 17, which is pretty cool. So, just as a warning to you that have kids, if that guy ever takes your daughter to prom, I'll tell you, 2 things are going on. Either she's going to go to rehab in the next several years, or she's going to be in Al-Anon for the rest of her life, whichever the case may be. So this is me. I went through over 20. My family was not wealthy. I did a lot of county funded, a lot of state funded. I did a lot of programs in California where you could knock on the door. the county really helped me. And there were a lot of means. It was, strangely enough, in California, easier if you were destitute to be able to find adequate treatment than perhaps if I had been a little more stable. So over 20, spent years in sober living houses and things like that. So I was that guy. Great in treatment. I always was voted most likely to succeed in treatment. I don't know if there is such a thing, you know. And I couldn't stay sober, so I was that guy. And we get a lot of calls. But me, a 90-year-old alcoholic who picked up her first drink 2 years ago, a 15-year-old who's been playing video games, and they all have something in common. They all have a few things in common. They all have some identical characteristics across the spectrum. And when we look at this problem above and beyond a drug problem, you can begin to see what they all have in common, and you can look at the problem in a different way. So we're going to go ahead and now we're going to look at the problem. And I'm going to try to look at it in a different way. My family got into a really serious trap. First trap that my family got into is that they believed that I was addicted to drugs, period. And when I say that, and I just got done saying I went through over 20 rehabs, polysubstance abuser, et cetera, you would think, well, didn't you just say, isn't it safe to assume that you were a drug addict? And it's like, yes, absolutely it was. I was physically dependent as well as psychologically dependent, et cetera, et cetera. The biggest trap my family got into was thinking that I was addicted to drugs, period. And the period is the critical point. Because if you focus on the drugs as the problem, you will fail at this. You will fail at this. Families fail at this. My mother believed that I was, at one time, I was the first person, I was student council president, who's who among American high school students, and at age 19, I was the first person arrested on a heroin charge in my town. I had a heroin problem. My mother knew in her heart that if only heroin got out of the town, I would be better. And then later I was picked up on cocaine. And my mother knew that I had now a cocaine problem, and if only I would get off the darn cocaine and quit hanging out with those cocaine addicts and drug dealers, I would get better. And my mother counted the number of drinks I had in terms of whether I was getting better or getting worse. She thought in her heart that I was an addict only, and that was my number one main problem. And if you live your life, if you look at that, if you create a clinical assessment based upon drugs and drugs alone, you will fail. And families create their own clinical assessments. When I hear a family member say to me, he's doing better because he's down to 2 beers a day instead of 5 beers a day, it's a wrong assessment. It's a wrong way of looking at it. It's looking at the symptoms rather than the problem. Drug and alcohol abuse is the symptom of the underlying problem, and we have to look at the true problems in order to understand addiction and recovery in a different way. So if you do look at the drugs alone, then your life will be polarized like my parents were. I was a binge addict in the end, which means that I could stay clean for 30 days. So in my parents' eyes, I was doing better for 30 days. I was doing awesome. And if I used for a day, then I was doing bad. And if I had a bad day, they had a bad day. If I had a good day, they had a good day. And they would even do such things as add up, well, in the last 6 months, he only used drugs twice, so therefore he's actually been clean for 178 days, so statistically, isn't that better? All kinds of manipulations in their own mind, looking at the drugs as the problem. And I'm going to tell you right now that the drugs are not the problem, they're a symptom. Most people think that addicts are addicted to drugs, period. And I'm going to tell you right now, yes, they may become physically and psychologically dependent, but they are not only addicted to drugs. They're addicted to something else, which creates the drug problem. Addicts are not addicted to drugs. Addicts are addicted to feelings, period. Addicts are addicted to feelings. If a drug, substance, behavior does one of two things, it has a great tendency to be abused. What are those two things? See, if it creates some form of pleasure, or some form of escaping of an uncomfortable feeling. If it does one of those two things or both of those things, it has a great tendency to be abused. There is nobody, I was driving, through here, and I'm pretty sure that I could pick up any drug on the planet. Actually, I can't. Because I cannot walk around the streets right now and pick up some insulin, which doesn't necessarily make me feel better or avoid discomfort. I probably can't go out and buy some illegal ibuprofen or antibiotics. Give me $100, it's going to take me a while to be able to hustle up some amoxicillin off the streets. I've never met anybody that we did an intervention for drinking too much water or mowing lawns. If it does one of those two things, it has a great tendency to be abused, period. So we have to look at the feelings. And what we talk about is an emotional model, a different way of looking at things, focusing only on the feelings involved. And if you can understand the feelings in regards to addiction, you can start to understand family systems in a different way. And there is a line that I say to families to get them to really kind of understand this. And what I say to them is that, okay, so grandma, who is spiritually based, and dad, who's get a damn job and quit doing drugs, and brother, who's punitive, and mother, who believes in disease model, forget about the drugs. And let me say a statement to you and see if you agree. Your loved one, as a result of what they have been doing, is no longer just addicted to drugs. Forget about the drugs for a minute. What have they become addicted to? They have become addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. And every addict on the planet will eventually become in that place where they are more addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities than even the substances themselves. And that line that I'm explaining to you describes an addict drunk or sober. It describes them drug seeking or not. It describes an addict with 6 months of sobriety or an addict with 1 minute of sobriety. And when I say that line to them, they think about the late-stage acute alcoholic sitting in a darkened room right now, drinking a beer, watching TV, making the world go away, and they nod their heads in agreement. Or they think of their son, the 17-year-old, who they've tried to say, you do your homework, you do your, how come you're not doing chores? And what does a kid do? He runs out the door. I don't want to deal with this right now. I'll do my homework tomorrow. Bam, and they are gone. They all begin to develop these similar attributes, which are all about avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. And where did it come from? It didn't come from Mr. Freud, although I'd love to blame it on him. But he said a lot of things that I don't agree with a lot of Mr. Freud, Dr. Freud, but then he said, he actually talked about something that I think is critical in understanding addicts. And he talked about what's called the pleasure principle. And what he basically said is that we human beings, when we are born, we all exist at what is called the pleasure principle, which is two factors. We exist on an operating basis of just two different things. We seek pleasure as babies, or we avoid pain. That's all we do. We do not operate rationally. We operate emotionally, not rationally. And if you want to understand a toddler, that's how they operate. What can I say or do right now to make this uncomfortable feeling go away? Cry, get some food, whatever it is. Or what can I say or do right now to feel better? As we progress, we gain emotional maturity, and eventually we gain what is called the reality principle. The reality principle is another way of saying rational over emotional. In other words, you may feel good going out and I'm going to blow all my money shopping today, but the rational part of you kicks in and says, I've got bills. It's not about what feels good for me today. It's more about the rational over the emotional. So we as children start this way, and if we emotionally mature, we end up in the reality principle. But not so with addicts. Addicts don't. If I were to say one thing, I'll say it on every intervention. As a result of their addiction, they have become emotionally immature. They may be brilliant as Einstein, but they are emotionally immature, and they behave emotionally like a 13-year-old. And when you're intervening on an 80-year-old, that everybody agrees that the 80-year-old responds like a 13-year-old emotionally, maybe it's something in common. They all behave that way. And those of you that interact with addicts, they may be smart, they may be brilliant, but emotionally, they all behave very much like children. Throwing temper tantrums, I want what I want when I want it now, shifting the blame, etc. King baby, we hear that all the time. So before I kind of get into more detail on this, I'm going to kind of go into a little bit of my story. And the reason I want to do it from my story is I know it well, but I want to tell you there are two versions of my story. There's the version that I used to give to you, which isn't really the right way of looking at it. And what I mean by you is when you go to 20-something rehabs, you sit in front of an assessment, you get an assessment, a clinical assessment or MMPI or whatever they're going to go ahead and do, and they're going to go through a life history, and they're going to ask a series of questions, a lot of which are focused initially on the substances. At what age were you when you started drinking? At what age were you when you started smoking cigarettes? At what age do your parents drink drugs? Do they do, etc.? So they start looking at these families, focusing on the drugs and the alcohol. And when I would do these assessments, I had a really cool story. I mean, it was really awesome because it wasn't my fault, And why wasn't it my fault? Because, you know, my mother was an alcoholic and bartender, sometimes come home till 1 in the morning. My stepfather was a drunk. My PTSD suffering father was an alcoholic. My grandmother, my Irish grandmother, said, David, a man is defined by his drink. You must pick the drink that defines you. She said that when I was 13. My mother got a DUI with me and my brother in the car at age 6. I had a really cool story that explained why poor David, from a medical perspective, became an alcoholic. But I'm telling you, let's forget about the alcohol and the drugs. So if we kick that out, let's look at my family system in a different way. My story is much different, of course, but I lean towards being a victim of this is why. It isn't my fault. This poor David. It's funny because when my brother heard me tell that story one time with poor David, and he was like, did we even have the same family? Because I thought our upbringing was pretty awesome. You know? He's like, when did this happen to you? Like, so we had just two different stories. My story was a little bit aberrated from the truth. But it was a story that I told 20-something times, poor David. So let's take the alcohol and the drugs out of the story. And let's look at it instead from a perspective of a family system. Forget about the alcohol, a family system that is becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. What would that family system look like? We didn't process feelings in my family very well. It wasn't always crazy. It was actually pretty cool. Like, my mother had the wonderful magical thinking of an alcoholic, and we were poor, and I didn't know we were poor. I thought we were the richest kids on the block. She had a neat way of thinking when we got our first bike, and we got a little thing, and even just every year we would go to this really fancy restaurant to celebrate. She'd always be like, you should get the steak and stuff like that. And we would go to this really fancy restaurant, and we were kings for a day, and it was just so awesome being us. And years later, actually a couple of years ago, I decided to visit that same restaurant. And apparently Sizzler has changed over the last few years. I was like, when did this happen? Magical thinking. My real story is pretty good. We had a pretty cool upbringing. But that's not the story I spun. So forget about the alcohol and the drugs. Let's look at my family system from a different perspective. Let's look at it minus the alcohol and drugs. Let's get it in terms of the avoidance behaviors that are going on. The addiction to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. Let's go back to the beginning when I was born. I was born July 24th, 1970. I went on Wikipedia and I wasn't there, so I tucked myself in there for this presentation on there. So I was born, into this alcoholic family and all that stuff. And before I ever picked up a drink or drug, I was maybe 8 or 9 years old. I was an avid reader. I don't know where. Library, I got the little book. I learned, I loved sci-fi and fantasy, and I loved it. I don't know when I became such an avid reader, but it was right around that period. I could read a book a day. I was a nerdy kid, and everybody in my family would look at me reading a book a day in the corner. Look at how smart he is. He'll go places and read a book a day. My dad said I didn't know what to do with it. Just read. I'm a smart kid, Reading a book a day. Look at how smart he'll be. Look at how he'll go places. They didn't ask the other question, what is a 10 or 12-year-old kid doing? Reading a book 16 hours a day. What is he avoiding? And again, I wish I could tell you it was the ravages of the alcoholic family, but it was actually pretty fun. But I had found a secret. That I could be, and I could escape. I could be somebody else. I loved fantasy, and the stories were all very similar. It was pretty cool. I could be it was usually like poor farmhand learns magic and becomes a sorcerer and saves the world, Or poor farmhand, becomes a space pirate and saves the world, or whatever it was. So there were always these, I could escape from the situation I was in. What was the situation I was in? It was pretty simple. I had thick Coke bottle glasses. I was terrible at sports. I was a scrawny kid. People would always come up, look at how scrawny you are. I was a dorky kid. I couldn't look people in the eye. I just had no concept, and it seemed like I was bad at everything. My brother was good at everything. I was bad at everything. And I had no girlfriends or no anything. I was that dorky kid. And I always said the wrong things and put my foot in my mouth. And I would never be a part of the popular group. I was the misfit. 20 years later, I would have been the trench coat wearing kid that everybody worries about, but I was that guy. And it's sad to say that the things I was into are really, really cool right now. I just apparently got too early, I guess. So I was uncomfortable being me, and I found a way not to be me. I found a way to make uncomfortable feelings and things go away for a minute, and it worked. Computers, I was around 12 years old, and computers were relatively new. I got volunteered to go into the first computer program in my little school. It wasn't a big deal, but it was kind of a big deal. And I loved it. And my mom saved up, and we got this $100 Timex Sinclair computer. Little thing, and I banged away on it. I could learn how to make a dot and go from here to there. It was pretty cool. And there I would be till 4 o'clock in the morning with the glow of the TV screen banging away on my little membrane keyboard. And everybody would leave me alone and say, look at how smart that kid is, banging away on that computer. He is going to be the next Bill Gates. And I never asked, what is a 12 or 13-year-old kid doing till 4 o'clock in the morning banging away on a keyboard? You know? Television in my family's home, even though we were poor, we had a TV in every room. Little TVs. I had a TV in my bedroom, TV in the bathroom, which is kind of bizarre. Not a brilliant bath, I don't know. At least we didn't shock ourselves to death. One in the kitchen, one in my brother's room, one in my mom's room. TV in every room. They had become addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. Video games came out. Atari 2600, we got one. Little blip cruises around. Kids today will never have my sympathies. You know, they get full three-dimensional whatever, and you know, this game sucks. I'm like, dude, I had a dot. Really? I'm serious. You know? But again, understand what's interesting about my family system. My mother was an avid reader. We had bookshelves upon bookshelves. She loved mystery and serial killers and detective and true crime and all that stuff. My family system, if you count the number of drinks, appears to be an alcoholic family, but if the drinks are not the problem, instead there's an underlying problem, then you can start to understand and predict why we behaved in some of the ways that we did. I had already been practicing what we call process addictions, if they get out of hand, on a daily basis, hour after hour after hour. And nobody caught it. Because unless one of these becomes primary, it'll never bump. How many kids do you know that go to rehab for video games? Really? No, they go to rehab because we found out they used heroin yesterday. Do we realize that they've been playing Xbox for 18 hours a day for the last 6 years of their lives, in their formative development years, that they are practicing an addiction over and over and over and over again? And it isn't until we catch them at the Majestic Star Casino gambling, and we say he has a gambling problem. When families call me, they identify the problem as the substance. He is a gambler, he is a heroin addict, he is a cocaine addict, and he has an eating disorder. And they don't look at the underlying. They look at the symptom and not the problem. And the problem becomes this. And it begins to define why I behave in the way that I do. So I am slowly and masterfully becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and situations, and I have not even picked up my first drink or drug. And when I do family presentations and things like that, they start to kind of look in their family's system and realize that their kid, you know, I do a lot of these things for schools and things like that. Where, you know, the kids are in school right now, where are they going to be in another 3 hours? They're going to be texting their friends instead of having face-to-face communications. They're playing video games or Xbox. Some of their first sexual behaviors will be via sexting at the age of 12. Kids today are flooded with escapist distractions. They are all, more so than you, when you were growing up, practicing minute by minute by minute by minute, what can I do right now to make this uncomfortable feeling or thing go away? And when they pick up a drink and they want to have 6 right away, we will blame it on the alcohol and not really understand that they have been in the game for the last 5 or 6 or 7 years. So what is the price for me going down this road? If I'm slowly becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and life situations, it's going to manifest itself in the outside world above and beyond this. There will be consequences, and I'm going to learn some really cool tricks. And some of these really cool tricks are all about what can I say or do to make an uncomfortable situation go away, such as lying. Lying is all about avoiding discomfort, period. If I tell you the truth, a negative outcome will come, will occur and an uncomfortable outcome, so I will learn how to lie. I didn't do it. I didn't take that money. I didn't. Honestly, officer, I've only had a couple, right? If I tell you the truth, you know, there's kind of a saying that we often joke about in recovery. We say, how do you know when an addict is lying? When they're moving their lips. That's what they say, right? That's not entirely true. It's, how do you know when an addict is lying? When to tell you the truth would create an uncomfortable consequence for them. Period. That is when they're lying. So I learned to lie. I learned to shift the blame. Wasn't me, you know, like the stories I told at every assessment. Postponing homework is the beginning practice of every heroin addict, right? I'll do it tomorrow. Postponing homework is a really cool mental trick. I learned a lot of different things. What can I do to feel better right now? If you've ever been confronted with the pile of paperwork and you convince yourself, I'll deal with it tomorrow, and I feel better right now, it works. It all works. I'm an expert at making uncomfortable feelings go away right now. I'm not saying I'm an expert at life. I'm an expert at the moment. What can I say or do to feel better right now? And that is my addictive tendencies above and beyond just the drinking of the drugs. Avoiding chores, I'll deal with it later, that kind of stuff. Terrible thing happened in May of 1986. I got this perm, and at the ages 16, 15, 16, I picked up my first drink. And what's really interesting is that there is a picture of me with a, I believe, old style, and a cigarette in my hand, as cool as can be. Alcohol was pretty accepted in my family system. It wasn't until the drugs came in that they all freaked out. But everybody believes that that is when it began. If I had only made different choices and hadn't drank or used drugs in 1986, my life would have turned out different. And it's kind of a cool tale. If I had never picked up a drug, I would be Bill Gates right now. No, I wouldn't. I was already on the path of what can I say or do to avoid uncomfortable feelings, things, in life situations. And if you look at some of the phone calls I get today, my 28-year-old son doesn't use drugs. I wish he did, but I have something to blame it on. But he's a bum. He sits in the basement playing video games, unable to get a job. When I try to talk to him, he explodes at me. And he shifts the blame, tries to blame me for his life problems. And that darn Obama. So as you see, this is the tsunami that the world is getting into. And only if they pick up a drink or drug will we label it as such and try to get them into effective treatment. So everybody looks at these progression curves, called the Jelinek curve often. And Jelinek curves are pretty cool. They go through the first use of drugs and all this, and they go grandiose or aggressive behavior, efforts to control fail repeatedly, promises and resolutions fail. And we do these with families, and it kind of gives them an indicator that usually most addicts are somewhere in the chronic stage. This is a great thing, but there's a simple one, which I like even more. And it's real simple, that as my ability to confront uncomfortable feelings, things, and situations decreases, I am developing skills to make uncomfortable feelings, things, and situations go away. That increases. And I'm going to kind of step over to here because it's better if I do this on this whiteboard. And there's something I really want you to understand in terms of emotional development. And it will help you to understand why addicts are almost all exactly the same, whether they're drunk or whether they're sober. And it basically, I mean, it goes like this. If I'm slowly becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and situations, then my tolerance, call it anxiety, if you will, 1 to 10. In other words, me, in my early addiction, early recovery, when faced with an emotionally difficult situation, would feel my anxiety would shoot up to about an 8. Normal life situations that you guys are used to confronting, I would shoot way up there. Why? Because when you avoid, if I were to ask you, here's what I want you to do I want you just not to open your bills. I want you to consciously decide not to do it. We'll figure out how to deal with the consequences, but I want you to look at the bills, and I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. I'll deal with it later. And as your ability to confront that uncomfortable pile of bills decreases, the anxiety every time that you look at that pile of bills will increase. Your ability will decrease. We as human beings, if we walk through emotionally difficult life situations, we gain emotional maturity. Everybody does it. You did it. If you skip it, you will go down and the stress in facing it. Have you ever blown something off work? I really need to confront this. Like my car right now is really messy, and every time I look at it, I say, I'm going to clean it up tomorrow. But my anxiety looking at that stupid car is like 10 times greater than when just had little pieces in there. And the more I consciously avoid it, the less able I am to kind of confront. It's just basic human nature. So as my ability to kind of confront these things kind of goes down, 5 factors of emotional development get affected. And this is the thing. This is the thing that I have families focus on. If I'm becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and life situations, 5 things are going to change in me. 5 things. And the first of which is accountability. Why in the world would accountability change if I'm becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities? If I'm addicted to avoiding an uncomfortable feeling, how is it possible for me to intentionally go into a situation where I am going to feel uncomfortable? Because to take accountability is an uncomfortable act. For those of you that have ever done anything wrong, there's probably 1 or 2 of you who've done something wrong, to truly take accountability, honey, I did this thing and I'm so sorry that I did it, is an uncomfortable process. If you learn to instinctively avoid uncomfortable feelings, then you will lose the ability to be accountable. And those clients that you guys work with that have what? No accountability, they have the opposite of accountability, which is an awesome coping skill when you're addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, which is shifting the blame, right? I didn't do it. I was there, somebody brought drugs out. I am an expert at shifting the blame, as it wasn't my fault, the reason was, etc. Expert at it. All human beings do it to some degree, but the lower you are on this scale, the less accountability you will have. So what is the second? Second is responsibility. So, okay, that's supposed to say it, responsibility there. So what is responsibility? Responsibility, everybody thinks is doing the right thing. It isn't necessarily doing the right thing. It's the ability to be uncomfortable right now, to make an uncomfortable sacrifice right now for the greater good, for a greater outcome a year from now. It's 401k thinking. It's my ability to make an uncomfortable sacrifice right now to have a great life a year from now, a week from now, a month from now. Or it is my ability to take an uncomfortable sacrifice now for the betterment of somebody else. That is what responsibility really is. Somebody may have a good work ethic through habit, but that doesn't necessarily mean they have responsibility. Responsibility is cause and effect. Again, it's 401k thinking. Have you ever met a 9-year-old that has 401k thinking? Have you ever explained a 401k to a 9-year-old? They will rationally understand everything that you say, but they operate emotionally. They have no accountability and no responsibility. If you were to explain to a 9-year-old, I'll tell you what, 9-year-old, if you save $1 every single week and you put it and invest it, you can retire at the age of 35. Rationally, they will get it. They operate emotionally, and right then and there, they're going to be sitting there going, what can I say or do to make this uncomfortable conversation go away? Can I go play now? So what is the opposite of responsibility? What is the opposite of making an uncomfortable sacrifice today to have a good life tomorrow? Is the opposite. It's what can I do right now to feel better right now? And if you think about addicts, it's what can I do? So it's all about feeling better now, despite the consequences of later. It is almost impossible for an addict to make an uncomfortable sacrifice today to have a good life a week from now. And many addicts many parents try to explain things from a rational standpoint. Honey, if you go to rehab, you'll have a better life tomorrow. You can go back to college and get your kids back. They don't operate like that. They are down here, and as such, they're all about feeling better right now, and that is it. What is the third thing? If I am addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, I will be incapable of being truly transparent. Transparency is another. What is transparency? It is my ability to be truly authentic. My ability to lower my guard, make myself vulnerable to share what is really going on with me. I am an expert at rehab as a client. I'm really good at rehab. I love rehab. I would be in rehab right now. It's a nice, comfortable bubble. They feed you. They tell you where to go. Your family forgives you. It's a pretty cool place. There are things called process groups where we process our feelings. I am an expert at processing yours and not mine. And it sounds like I'm a part of the group. David, anything going? I'm fine. I'm fine. David, you know, you've got a warrant out for your arrest. Your girlfriend dumped you. You owe $50,000 to the IRS. Your family wants nothing to do. You have no car, no driver's license, no job, no place to live. How are you doing? Pretty good, man. Everything will work out. God will take care of me. Fine. I'm fine. Alcoholics and addicts often are the most fine people you can meet. It's a misrepresentation of how I'm really doing, or a projection of something that I'm not. You know, it's, I'm fine, or I'm bigger than or better than, etc. If I have lost the ability to be transparent, to be authentic, how healthy am I going to become? Fourth is honesty. Like I said, with honesty, if I am losing the ability to be uncomfortable or feel uncomfortable, I will rarely be honest, unless the outcome is to benefit me. I'm not saying that I was never honest. When there was a comfortable outcome, I was honest. You know, you caught me. I did it. Look at how honest I am. You know, how do you go to so many rehabs? Well, when you rip your family off or do something crazy or stand before the judge and you know not to go is going to result in a long-term outcome, you can, I'll go. Please, I'm sincere. I'm not saying I wasn't sincere, but I am an expert at making uncomfortable feelings in life situations go away, such as consequences. And number 5 is sobriety. And when I talk about sobriety, I don't just mean using drugs. I mean all distractions. And the reason I list this thing as last is because this is the one everybody focuses on. So now if we look at these 5 factors, we get a better picture of what an addict really is from this viewpoint, which is seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And these are the 5 factors that describe almost every addict that you'll ever encounter. If I were to explain to you somebody who takes no accountability, has no responsibility, is unwilling to make an uncomfortable sacrifice now for a later outcome, is fine or projects an illusion that they're bigger than or less than or whatever that it is, failure to be honest, and whether they're using drugs or gambling or focusing on relationships, etc. This describes them. I lived in a lot of halfway houses. If you were to walk into any halfway house right about now, guess what they're doing? Half of them are watching TV if it's permitted. The other half are reading books. The other half are on their phones texting. They have no real coping skills yet. And they are all practicing avoidant, distracted behaviors. So this is just a different slice. And if you want to understand how an addict is doing, look at the 5 factors. My family instead counted the number of drinks that I had. David is 60 days sober. He was doing well. But if they had looked at the other 5 factors, I was not doing well. They would understand that me sitting in mom's basement counting the days sober wasn't necessarily improving my life. I run into families all the time. How's Joe doing? Oh, he's doing well. He's got 92 days clean. Well, is he going to those meetings? Ooh. You know, he said that when he goes to those meetings, all he hears about are drugs, and it makes him want to use. So we don't think it's a good idea that he goes to those meetings. Well, what about the therapy thing? Was he doing the therapy that I get that was mandated? Well, he went, he blew, you know, he should go, but he just doesn't really like that therapist. I guess he's just kind of a jerk. We're looking for a therapist that he likes. Really? Well, what about the job? I thought he was going to move into that halfway house. Ooh, no, we decided it'd be better if he lived with us. How about the job? Well, the economy. The economy's done wonders for addicts, you know, that darn economy. And then Obama. Once he's out of here, I'll be able to get a job, and then mom. But wait a couple years and stuff like that. So looking at the things are a little bit different. So when you look at my life and you set aside the drinking and the drugs, you can look at things a little bit differently. So given enough time, the drug addict becomes expert at avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities, but at a price. And what is the price? An addict is no longer addicted to drugs per se or period. They have become addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. So I'm going to get into a little more detail to kind of prove this concept to you. That every addict is really, this is the underlying problem. They are experts at making uncomfortable feelings and things in life situations go away. When we do an intervention is an uncomfortable thing. It would be for you. If I'm going to gather up your family, we're going to talk to you about what you're doing in your shop or whatever it is. It's not fun. We try to soften it a little bit because if it's too uncomfortable, they run away. They have no ability to confront an uncomfortable life situation, so we have to come in smooth. We have to come in really soft. So we start by reading very, very loving letters. Very, very loving letters that start with, Dear Joe, you're my son and I love you. And I'll never forget the day that you were born. And I'll never forget when you were 12 and we went to Disneyland together and you looked at me and blah, blah, blah. So we lay this spiritual loving foundation, touching a little bit about the drug, and then we begin to talk. So we try to create this comfortable thing, but what are we offering the addict? We are offering him to go away to an uncomfortable treatment program. And you are now dealing with an addict who is an expert at making uncomfortable things go away. And this is what an intervention is really about. So when you go up there, you are going to see a master at making uncomfortable feelings in life situations go away. And these are just some of the coping skills that you're going to see present. The first of which is distraction. Distraction is they're looking out the window. We have a rule, no dogs in the room. Why? Because all their attention is on the dog. They're petting the dog. They cannot confront. Like, look me in the eye here. Whoa. They can't confront this uncomfortable thing. They try to escape internally and they can't. If you intervene on a 17-year-old and don't take his phone away, he's texting behind his back. I don't know how they can text behind their back, but apparently they can. They're all about distraction and escape. The second is adamant denial. I can't believe you guys are doing this right now. I'm not high, I'm not doing drugs, I'm not doing any of those kind of things. So the adamant denial is a great way of making uncomfortable situations go away, because if we buy into it, the intervention is over. And I've had many families that will sit there and say, I think he's telling the truth. Are we really sure we're doing the right thing here? Lying. Lying is another trick that they learn to make the uncomfortable confrontation go away. I swear to you, I did not take that money. I don't know, I did not. They are all lying. And the videotape that you have of me taking the money is obviously somebody else that looks like me to set me up. It's probably that ex-wife of mine who's been out to get me since 1975. Adamant. Offering of hope. Offering of hope is one of the coolest manipulations that you will ever hear, and it is, I swear to you I'll never do it again. I don't need to go to treatment. I swear to you I'm better. You can hold on to my car keys. You can drug test me every single day. You can hold on to my paycheck. Whatever you do, just I don't need to go to that rehab. Let me see a therapist. I'll go to this AA meeting. The minute I don't go to an AA meeting, I will go to your rehab. I promise. They're an expert at making the rehab go away. Suicide threats. We take suicide threats very seriously. Sometimes we encounter a professional suicide threatener who learned at the age of 6 that if he threatens suicide, he can get a cookie, and he's been practicing it ever since. And they're a hard, hard case. Because I've had guys that are like, fine, hang on a second, and they'll run and they'll grab a noose. I just want you all to know that this is the noose that I'm going to hang myself with. They're like, okay, so now we have to get the police involved. We have to take it seriously, but they are professionals at it. And what they are doing is training their family not to confront them and make them uncomfortable. The outcomes will be worse. Explosively reacting at family members. They are training the family that if you confront me in an uncomfortable way, I will make it 10 times more uncomfortable for you. And a lot of times we'll run into this with violence, this kind of thing, where that is their manipulation to make, and like, for example, meth addicts. Meth addicts are very explosive. You try to confront, you got to tiptoe with a meth addict. They're real crazy. We've had them pull guns out and stuff. Like, you got to go really gently with a meth addict because they will flip out on you. But it's sad when you'll talk to a family member on the phone because she'll whisper. This is a mom. She'll whisper and she'll say, you can't call me back because if he finds out, he could kill me. She has been hijacked so hard through the fear because every time she tried to talk to him about it, he punched holes in the walls or punched her. So he has trained her, do not talk to me in an uncomfortable way. Not reacting at all. Kids are good at this. Kids, you intervene on a kid, they sit there with their arms crossed, and they don't do anything. They just sit there. They won't engage with you. They will just wait. Where did they learn that? Because they've learned it for the last 4 years. When mom and dad are upset, they will yell at them, and you just sit there on the couch, and sooner or later, mom and dad go away. And it makes for a really long intervention, sitting there talking to a kid for 6 hours who refuses to engage with you, but sooner or later, they got to talk. avoiding, hiding, or leaving. If it becomes too uncomfortable, they will leave. So part of the dance is to try to keep the discomfort level. Well, hey, hang on. So you talk to them in a nice way, and then we go in a little uncomfortable, and you got to dance a little bit with it. Because if it hits like a level 5, they're out the door. They just can't deal with it. I don't want to deal with this. A lot of times when I see the pressure about to blow, I'll be like, hey, do you smoke? Like, here, let's go out and have a cigarette. Let's go, And then I always tell them, you can run away if you want. I'm like getting fat and old, so I'm not chasing you. And that a lot of times takes away the, like, I could run away. I'm like, yeah, you're an adult. I can't grab you. Run. And they have a cigarette and they tone down a little bit and they come back in. So invalidation. Invalidation is a really cool manipulation that makes uncomfortable things go away. We offer them treatment, so they begin to invalidate first me, then the family. The first me is, I don't know that guy. You don't know me. You haven't been where I've been, so who are you to tell? Mom, I will talk to you alone, but I don't want this guy. He doesn't know my story. I didn't invite him here. So he begins to invalidate me, then he begins to invalidate the family. Mom, you never even smoked pot. How do you even know? It's heroin. You don't know anything about heroin. Like, really, this is ridiculous. You guys trying to give me suggestions or advice. You never even used it. And then they begin to invalidate treatment. Invalidation of treatment is, you want me to go there? I got 15 buddies of mine that have been through that program. None of them. They use drugs in that program. So to send me there, or the invalidation of the recovery style. Well, I'll go somewhere, but as long as they don't have, as long as they don't have the AA meetings, like, because I'm in that 12-step stuff, as long as they don't talk about the God thing, as long as they don't have that therapy and stuff, because I'm not big on the therapists and stuff like that, as long as I can, like, leave when I want and stuff, or if they get a TV, the food's good, I might go. So they kind of rattle off the invalidations of why it won't work. And a lot of times we'll get a call from a family, we'll say we want to help him to get into treatment, but it won't work if he goes here and here and here. So the addict is designing a treatment plan. Shifting the focus. Is they will always shift it onto family members. And I always warn them, whatever your baggage is coming out today. And it's scary for that family because you get some zingers out there, well, Joe smoked pot with me yesterday. And they're like, oh, no, Joe, how could you do that? And stuff like that. So we just tell them, don't react to it because it's just a manipulation designed to shift the focus. And those of you that have done groups and stuff, we shift the focus all the time. Well, this is about me. Well, let me tell you about what happened in 1972, And I've seen interventions where they start arguing about what happened 35 years ago. And the whole thing gets derailed. But it's a trick. What can I do to take the uncomfortable attention off of me and shift it into a whole different direction? They're experts at it. Blaming, this isn't my fault, it's you, mom. The most common thing that you'll hear from a 25 or under who's living at mom and dad's house is the phrase, well, you stress me out so much that I want to use, is what they'll say. They'll say it a lot of times. They'll say it to mom over and over and over anytime mom's trying to help them or whatever. What they're doing is teaching mom not to do that, not to make them uncomfortable. Separation, when you're in a group, they will say, I'll talk to you alone, mom, not with these people, because to talk to mom is more comfortable than a group. So if you look at what's happening with this addict and this intervention, they're experts at making this uncomfortable thing slowly chisel away into a more comfortable option. Sympathy ploy. Sympathy ploy is a reversal into victim mode. And they're really, really good at it. And it really goes like this. Okay, it's great that all you guys here get your perfect lives. You want to beat on me some more? Okay, fine. I know what this is about. This is an excuse to kick me out because none of you loved me. You never loved me. And I can't help it that I got in a car wreck 17 years ago and I broke my ankle and I've been on medicine ever since. The doctor gives me the 800 milligrams of Oxycontin with 5 doctors and stuff, but are you a doctor? Are you a doctor? Because this is medicine, man. I wish you could understand what I'm going through right now. If there were a way. So I don't want to kind of minimize, but people that are prescription pill addicts, they're really hard to intervene on. You'll never hear the phrase medicine more often. And if you say addict or drug, whoa, let's stop you right there. And it's kind of interesting, and they'll be like, Well, I'll go for like my wine drinking. But like, I need a place where I can keep taking my, Valiums and stuff. Because I need that for my anxiety. Not understanding that cause and effect, that benzo rebound effect, right? That if you take benzos for anxiety, you will develop anxiety. If you take painkillers, you will develop pain. They don't get it. Agreement? Agreement is yeah, whatever you say. They just do it. Yeah, whatever, but they don't ever make an action. Stalemate is really difficult. Stalemate is I will never. Actually, we're getting this more and more. Stalemate is I will never quit. I'm just going to say that right now. And we're getting more with the marijuana thing and the legalization thing. I don't want to get into the sides of whether it should or shouldn't and all that, but the problem is when we show up on an intervention, we're not there because somebody's smoking pot. We're there because as a result of what they're doing, all of this, they have no ability to face the uncomfortable parts of their life, and as a result, I don't get phone calls from, yes, my CEO son, who, makes $1 million a year and goes to church every day and has healthy relationships, is smoking pot. No, I get my 28-year-old kid hasn't left his basement in 3 weeks, and I'm paying all his bills, and when I try to talk to him, he flips out on me and talks about his anxiety and how marijuana is the only thing, and he begins to quote the law at me, and in the Bible, thou shalt partake in every seed-bearing herb, and and all the wonderful marijuana stuff that's out there. And he was going to move to Colorado and start a grow operation, and the man's trying to bring him down, and all that stuff. And we hear all that stuff on interventions, and I'm not there to have a legal argument with them or a moral argument. Medicine is designed to help you, and if as a result of your medicine, you are going the exact opposite direction, then maybe it's time to change your medicine. And that's as simple as it is. When diabetics take insulin, their life improves. So, and postponement is, eventually they will agree to go, but not today. I need a few days to handle my affairs. They get narrowed down to that. They realize that they have to go, but just not today. And they're sincere about going, but not today. They believe it. I had a homeless guy once that we intervened on. He was living in worn out for his rest. He was living in a garage with his buddies, and he had all these problems, lost everything. And we did this intervention, and he was like, I'll go, but I need a week to handle my affairs. And I was like, affairs here. I don't want to tell you. I got some, I don't want to get you involved with the wrong people and stuff like that, And a lot of times they do stuff like that. The cool one is, well, Mom and Dad, I didn't want to tell you this, but I owe T-Bone, the drug lord, $100, and I need to give it to him before I go, otherwise he's going to come here and bomb your house. So can I have $100 before I go to rehab and pay him? Because I would feel really, really guilty if he came and blew up the house and you can't come. Because, they'll freak out. Oh, shoot me. I bring you there. And in reality, it's, I'll go tomorrow. Let me just use one more time. The unspoken thing is, can I just have one more? Although opiate addicts will actually say that. They will say, I'll go, but I need to use one more time before, because they don't want to get sick, and all that stuff. So what do all these things have in common? What can I say or do to make this uncomfortable confrontation go away? Or what can I say or do to make this uncomfortable treatment center option go away? This is what an intervention is about. They operate emotionally, not rationally. People try to have a rational argument with an addict. They do not operate rationally. They operate 100% emotionally. And to kind of make that more real, rational versus emotional. Okay, when we finally get their agreement, they're starting to agree, right? They will then ask a series of questions about treatment. And I have never in my life, in 12 years, had an addict ask me a rational question about treatment, ever. They all ask emotional questions about treatment. In other words, they do not ask rational questions about the efficacy or success or style of treatment involved, etc., which they would if there was another problem going on. They ask emotionally based questions. What do I mean by emotionally based questions? Comfort based questions. Feeling better or not feeling uncomfortable. Number one, how long is it? Number two, where is it? Number three, can I leave if I want to? Number four, can I get my own room? Number five, can I smoke if I want to? Number six, how is the food? Number seven, does it have a pool? Number eight, if I'm going to go somewhere, it should be warm. If I'm going to have to do this thing, can I go somewhere warm? Number nine, can I bring my dog? Number 10, can I bring my iPhone, iPad, whatever? Number 11, is it co-ed? Number 12, rattle off the list, right? I have not asked a single rational question. about the efficacy of treatment. They have asked only emotionally based questions. So let me give you another example to make it more real. I have a friend of mine, she was diagnosed with cancer, and she said to me, I hope you never experience that moment of sitting in that hospital doctor's office and hearing the words, "I'm sorry that you have cancer." And I hope that I never do. And my friend who was diagnosed with cancer began to ask a series of rational questions about the treatment. She did not ask if it had a pool, or can she get her own room, or how is the food. She asked about the efficacy of treatment. What is the success rate? Who is the best doctor in the Chicago area? What is the surgery going to be like? What can I do to increase the odds? Is there any lifestyle changes that I need to make to survive through this thing? The chemotherapy. Actually, she did ask one emotionally based question. She said, will I lose my hair? That's the one she asked. But she did not ask any emotionally based questions. She asked all the rational questions. And ironically, my friend, as she was sitting there, had probably a higher chance of survival than most of the addicts that I intervene on. The addicts who are sitting there, dying. Does it have a pool? Can I leave if I want to? How's the food? This is the reality. And this is how they behave drunk or sober. With 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, etc. Addiction and treatment is not a crapshoot. Recovery is not a crapshoot. If you want to know who makes it, usually those that do the uncomfortable parts. I'm an expert at avoiding the uncomfortable parts of my life, which is why you can go to 20 rehabs and not do well. What did I really do in a 28-day program? You can sit in a process group and not do anything uncomfortable. You can not follow any of the uncomfortable solutions. You can go out for coffee after meetings and not actually raise your hand and say, I have a problem today, can you help me? You can avoid 4 steps. You can avoid making amends. You can avoid all of the uncomfortable parts of recovery and never gain emotional maturity. And you can be a 15-year-old at the age of 30, 40, 50, 60 years old, never really getting better. The family blaming the alcohol and the drugs. So we're all about family systems. So why is it that families wait to intervene? And the answer is because of that guy. And that guy is the addict in the center of the family system. And I've dropped some hints about it, that if an addict is becoming addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities, then their life skills are very, very low. Their coping skills are very, very low. Actually, I'm sorry, their coping skills are pretty good in terms of avoidance, but real healthy coping skills, they almost have none. If Charles Darwin came back from the dead and looked at my life, he would have said, I have to reevaluate this whole survival of the fittest thing, because according to my calculations, you shouldn't be doing very well. And yet when I was 23 and a full-blown addict, I was retired. I really was. How was I retired? I said that to my mother. I had a free house. It was pretty cool. I didn't pay a bill. I had my mother had a magic fridge. It was neat. You open it and food appeared. I don't know where it came from because I never bought it. And the lights turned on like magic. And there was all the money in the world you could want. You just have to wait until mom either falls asleep or goes to work or forgets to hide her purse under the bed. And there are no consequences in anything that you do. If you go to jail, you get bailed out an hour later. And if you rent your car to drug dealers on the south side of Chicago and you can't find it, you can call your mom and she will rush over and knock on the doors of drug dealers trying desperately to find her car. I was retired at the age of 23 and I was surviving rather well. You would say I wasn't, but I was retired with absolutely no consequences in my life. So, what was happening? If I'm addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings in life situations, yes, I'm developing coping skills to make them go away, but as a result of my lifestyle, I'm creating such consequences, so it's a feedback loop. I'm creating consequences, they're hitting me, I'm trying to avoid them. Left alone, it is almost impossible for me to continue down this path. So I learned the coolest trick in the world, and the trick is all about enabling. And families, when I mention the word enabling, they think they understand what it is. And they actually understand the symptoms of enabling. They don't understand the cause of enabling. when I do an intervention, I'm like, we're going to talk about enabling. Moms are always like, I enable, I'm the guilty one, I'm the one, I'm sorry, but she's really wrong. She doesn't understand the cause and effect of enabling. And this is a different way of looking at enabling from this perspective. And we're going to talk about is something that I call systemic enabling, and it really is just a little feedback loop. And what it is that there's an A, B, C. And here's the A. The A is that I will create, or my addiction will create an uncomfortable consequence in my life. So discomfort is coming my way in the form of arrows, consequences, whatever it is, financial, whatever it is. They're coming my way. And I'm addicted to avoiding uncomfortable things. So I will, B, hijack the emotions of my family using one of 4 emotions, primary, hope, fear, sympathy, or guilt, in such a way that when they feel it more strongly enough, they will be compelled to make my crisis go away in such a way that they will think it is their idea in the first place. And I'm not saying that this is planned, I'm saying this is instinctive. A 3-year-old learned how to do it. If any of you have children, do you have children? You ever have a 3-year-old, right? They learn how to cry, right? They can't even talk, right? 3-year-olds talk, kind of, ish. They cry, there's level 1, right? I want a cookie, level 1 cry, then there's a level 2, I want a cookie, then there's the level 3, throw things, want a cookie, level 4, temper tantrum. Like they have a series of things that are designed to cause you to make the uncomfortable crisis go away and give them a darn cookie. Sometimes you succumb to it, sometimes you don't. All I'm saying is that at an early age, they learn how to play on your emotions. Here's another, for example. You ever punish your 5-year-old, 6-year-old kid, and you're no food, no dinner, right? Tonight, and they go upstairs, they come down, and they're like they're hitting you emotionally. They are learning how to hijack your emotions. They're not going to come down and rationally explain why they should have dinner. Hello, Mom, I have a chart here that shows that during my formative years, it's important for me to get nutrition. No, they will hijack your emotions. Hope, guilt, sympathy, or fear. And we're going to go over each of these because I want to make it, this is not something I planned. This is something that as a result of uncomfortable crisis after uncomfortable crisis, I practice. And all human beings do this to some degree. But you probably are not beset with 35 uncomfortable crises as a result of your lifestyle per day. So you're not practicing how to make these things go away over and over and over and over again. Those that had an emotional connection to me, I could emotionally hijack. Those that don't, it was impossible for me to hijack. Which is why people outside of a family system, or those of you that don't have an emotional connection, look at the addiction in a different way, or look at the family system. You know logically what the solution is. And it's frustrating because a lot of times people would come to my mother who has an emotional connection, they have no emotional connection to me, and they would be very, very frustrated with my mother and say, don't you see what you're doing is wrong? It is impossible for me to hijack that person, but my mother is subject to my emotional hijacking. So let's go over this, and I'm going to start with guilt. So how is it that guilt works? Guilt, it is impossible for you to punish somebody if you feel guilty towards that person. It's impossible. Let's say, for example, you had a child, right? And you saw they had this homework thing they were working on, and I don't know, you just weren't thinking, and you threw it in the shredder, and you thought it was garbage, and they go to school the next day, and they're like flunk, they get an F. My mom must have threw it away. Sorry, I got to give you an F. And they come home, Mom, I got an F. The term paper, I couldn't find it. I didn't know where it was. I swear to you, Mom, I did it. And you realize what happened to it. What happened to it? You threw it away. And as a result of what you did, they got an F. So when you look at that F, are you going to ground them? It is impossible for you to ground somebody, to punish somebody when you feel guilt. It is impossible. So guilt is a powerful thing. The secret of every family system is that somewhere deep inside, there is a huge amount of guilt. And guilt, if you're ever a parent, you will experience guilt sooner or later. And the guilt comes in interesting ways. They're 3 years old and you're washing the dishes, and you hear a thump, and you turn around and they have whacked their head. You were not paying attention, you terrible, terrible mom, and you will feel guilt. Oh my goodness, I should have been paying attention. They're 8 years old and they come home with their little report card and they're like, hey, here's a report card, and you're like, A, D- conduct. And you are not mad at them for the first D- that they did. You will look at the mistakes that you made. I should have paid more attention, I should have got a tutor, or I should have read with them at an early age. You will begin to feel a degree of guilt. And as your child has problems, you will experience guilt. And if they're a nerdy kid, you will experience guilt. And if they're this, they'll experience guilt. My mother, by the time I was 19 years old, I was first kid in the town arrested on a heroin charge. Mom was pretty proud. You know, she had a pretty long list by then of the mistakes that she felt she had made. She was sober by then, and reasonably a good mom, but she had a pretty long secret list that she kept in her back pocket. And it was something like, I shouldn't have worked as many hours, I shouldn't have been a single mom trying to raise 2 kids, I should have went on welfare so that I could have quit my job, I should have not divorced their father, I should have not married the stepdaughter, I should have not divorced them. She had a huge list of all the mistakes. She hugged me too much, she hugged me too little, she didn't say I love you enough. She didn't give me enough attention, she shouldn't have drank, she shouldn't have. So her pile was so huge, and she knew all the mistakes that she had made as a mom, just knew it in her heart. So she knew that somewhere she had made mistakes, and that if she had been a better mom, I would have not turned out the way that I did. That was my mom's guilty secret. She believed it. She once said to me it was so important for her that I got sober so that maybe I would redeem her as a mom. So it was her thing. So fast forward, I'm 19, I'm 20 years old, I'm stealing, doing all kinds of crazy stuff, and every blow that I do is hitting her sense of self. She raised me. So the guilt is powerful. So how is it that you intentionally cause somebody to feel guilt? Well, I didn't call her up and say, Mom, you're a bad mom, or if you had done this, I wouldn't have turned out that way. I'm talking about creating a guilty moment. And I'll give you an example of a scenario that happened a dozen times. So I'm back at my mom's house. You know, I've been kicked out of somewhere or whatever it is or whatever. Again, I land back at mom's house. And the rules are real simple. Don't use drugs. Go to meetings. You know, pay her back. Whatever it is, right? So I'm there a few days. My stepdad had this big change thing and I stole it. I ran out the door with a big change thing at 2 in the morning and I went on a big drug binge, South Chicago. I'm gone for days. And I come back. I got no money, no place to stay. So I come back and I'm all sad. Sincerely sad, regretful. Sorry that it happened again. My mother is sitting in her room watching TV. She probably hasn't slept for days. Mad and worried. Is he dead? Is he this? Mad. You know, and she looks at me and she says, I just can't do this anymore. I'm sick of this. I've been doing this for years. You stole from us again. You've lied to us. Your stepdad's going to divorce me. You're making a fool out of me. Everybody says I can't do this anymore. I cannot do this anymore, David. You can't stay here. You cannot stay here. And I say, Mom, I understand. You know, I understand. I know that you meant well, and I'm sorry I disappointed you. And I'll go pack. And, so I go to my little corner or wherever I'm at, and I get my stuff. And it takes me about an hour to pack about this much belongings. I'm pretty good at the slow pack. I've got that down to a science. Little slow pack, the zippers and slow packing. And usually, within that hour, my mom will come by and sometimes cave out of worry or whatever it is. But this time, let's say she doesn't. So I get the slow pack done, and I go back in, and I just say, you know, Mom, I just want you to know that you're my biggest supporter, and you've always been there for me, and I really appreciate all that you've done. And I'm sorry that I don't know why I'm the way that I am. I wish that I was different. Wish that I had never used those drugs in the first place. And I'm sorry, you know. But before I go, I know you said don't ask me for anything, but I haven't eaten in a few days. Can I get a glass of milk and a peanut butter sandwich? My mother always teases me, go have your peanut butter sandwich, a glass of milk. I am hungry, so I gotta go. I haven't eaten in 3 days, so I go and I get my slow peanut butter and jelly sandwich and a really slow glass of milk, and I have it. She's simmering over there, but her anger is dissipating a little bit. And as I'm doing the slow thing, etc., and I come back in and I say, well, you know, I'm gonna get going, and I don't have a phone, so I don't know when I'm gonna be able to call you, but when I get a quarter, I'll call you from a payphone or something. I'm going. And you see what I'm doing? I'm creating an outcome, a very, very guilty moment of her kicking her poor wayward son out. It's easy to kick somebody out when you're mad. My mom is now mad at level 3, whereas she was mad at level 8. And I grab the suitcase, And I got the loud door open down to the science, and it's clang, 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 and I swing it open, and I roll out the door. And my mother comes around the corner, and she's like, where are you going? Where, out of curiosity, where are you going? And I say to her, I'm probably going to go to Renee's. And she's like, Renee is a drug dealer. Renee is a drug addict. Why would you let those scumbags help you instead of the people that love you? Why do you always go to them? Why do you always go to them? And I look her in the eye and I say, you know what, Mom? I got nowhere else to go. You're kicking me out. And I start to roll away. And my mother says a dozen times, wait, come back in here. Sleep on the couch. We'll deal with this in the morning. Never made it past the morning. So that is how you instinctively create an outcome that causes guilt. Do you notice that I never asked my mother to stay? I never did I? In my story. I pushed a button, and when it gets strong enough, you will be compelled through guilt to act. I'll give you another example of how guilt operates to protect an addict. My brother's getting sick and tired of this. My brother is really sick and tired of this. So a few months later, he comes over there barreling, and I wasn't there. I don't know where I was. I'm at my meeting, you know, maybe. So, like a 2-day-long meeting or whatever I'm at. So my brother comes by, and he's just mad. He's going to school, he's going to college, getting married, white picket fence, all this stuff. And he says, you know what, I'm just sick and tired of all this. And, you know, I can't take this anymore. Was that me or okay? Oh, sorry. No problem. So he's sick and tired. He's so mad. He's like, Mom, I can't see that he's doing this to you. He's making a fool out of you. Let me tell you about David. Now, my brother and I are a year apart, which means we have similar high school friends. I was on this path to whatever, and I turned into a train wreck. My reputation was terrible. And he wanted to inform my mother of exactly what the town that I lived in thought of me. And he began to rattle off the list of, number one, he's a scumbag. They think he's a drug dealer. He is a thief. When he walks in the room, people hide their wallets. They think he's the biggest piece of crap. He's a liar. He will. And did you hear, Mom? You don't know about when he stole the girl's car and sold it for drugs, do you? Borrowed the girl's car and literally sold it for drugs. That girl who was going to college had to walk. She didn't have her car anymore. You didn't know that story, did you, Mom? Let me tell you some more stories about your loving brother, scumbag David, and rattle off a list. And I'm going to tell you what my mother heard. My mother didn't hear, he's a scumbag, he's a loser, he's a this. She heard, you raised a scumbag, you raised. And with every dagger that my brother tried to throw into me, it hit my mom. And my mom's guilt increased exponentially. So what did my mother do instinctively when her guilt got strong enough? Is she instinctively created a protective bubble around me, and she disowned my brother at that moment. I had just stolen from my family, and she had disowned my brother who did everything right. I was wondering why he didn't come around for a year or two. I didn't know the story until later. When you feel emotion strong enough, you will be compelled to act in a particular way. AA says you're powerless over drugs and alcohol. Family members become powerless over the emotional hijacking. If you feel guilt strong enough, you will be compelled to act on it. Spouses feel guilt. How do spouses feel guilt? I can train a spouse. I have an ex-wife. You can train her through guilt, and they'll hear it, which is, if I make him upset, he will drink. Last night, we got in an argument, and I feel really bad because I said some things I shouldn't have. He went out and drank. I wish I hadn't said the things I did because it caused him to drink. Do you see what's happening here? The guilt of being this spouse. Spouses, it's terrible. Because I don't care how you start, when you end up, it's almost they're choosing drugs and alcohol over you one day at a time and making you feel guilty as a result of it. That if you had been a better wife, then maybe I wouldn't be down the path that I was on. That if you had made different choices, if you had been there for me, and you'll hear it all the time, how could you abandon me like this? You're going to leave me? I have disease. I'll show you in the book. It's not my fault that I act the way that I do. And you're going to abandon me my time of need like this. You're going to throw me out? What does that say about you? Because I was there for your cancer, and you're not here for mine. Thank you. So guilt. So guilt is an important one, right? So sympathy. I already touched on sympathy. Sympathy is the professional victim. It's not my fault. And the thing is that, oh, I'm sorry. There's one time when families are immune to emotional hijacking? Well, there's kind of two times. There's one primary time, is when you're mad. And the roller coaster is, I'm mad, so nothing you can say or do is going to cause me to change and enable you in any way, shape, or form. Madness doesn't last forever. But there's a cool way to make somebody go from mad to feeling sorry for you, and it's like that, sympathy. Sympathy is, it wasn't my fault. The reason I got fired was because the boss didn't like me, and why did you use? You know, and you'll hear this from families. Why did he use? Well, his girlfriend broke up with him, and he really loved that girl. You know, and he took it hard. And then he lost his job. So he's been kind of on this downward spiral since. You hear what I just described? Poor, poor guy. Really, why did he lose his job? Why did his girlfriend dump you? You know what I mean? Usually there's the story behind the story, cause and effect. So sympathy is a great way of flipping things. And I've done it. I've had family members that were really upset at me, and I just flip it on them. They're like, you know what, you can go ahead and rip on me. I'll tell you what, because I'm going to explain to you this. I've been in 20 rehabs, so you can't sit there and say that I haven't tried. I don't know why getting sober is so much harder for me than it is for everybody else, but it is. Okay, and I'm sorry that I made a choice 15 years ago, 20 years ago that put me in this situation. Okay, but let me tell you a little secret. Because you can go ahead and rip on me and call me a piece of garbage all you want, but I wake up every single day and look at myself in the mirror, and I know what a piece of garbage I am. I know what a terrible brother I am. I know what a terrible son I am. I know what a terrible employee. I know all the things that I could have been. You want me to list the failed college? You want me to list all the jobs that I got fired from? You want me to list all the girlfriends that said I love you 1 minute and then goodbye? I could rattle off the list. So go ahead and bring it on. Because you with your little white picket fence and wonderful life, I'd sell my soul to have that. I got nothing. So go ahead, have another shot. So sympathy, right? Sympathy. I can flip it into, I didn't mean it like that, man. I'm sorry. It's just you got to understand where we're at. You know, I'm sorry. I have had more people apologize for me stealing from them than you can count. Sympathy. Fear. Fear is, if you confront me, I will make an uncomfortable consequence even worse, right? I will blow up, I'll run away, I'll commit suicide, etc., etc., etc. I will overdose, I'll do X, Y, and Z. I've had many, many addicts that convince their parents, if you do not support my heroin addiction, I will go rob, steal, etc., etc. If I don't give them 20 bucks for heroin, they will go rob a pharmacy, and then they will go in jail. And you know how those jails are. He'll get worse, and he'll get beat up. And I want him to get help. Fear. Hope. Swear to you that I am sincere. I will never do it again. You can give me a lie detector, give me a drug test every single day, hold on to my car keys, etc., etc., etc. Hope is a super powerful thing. So how is it that you get 10 families that all had a kid who overdosed 2 days ago, is in the ER, and they are freaked out and they are willing to do whatever it takes? How do you get a kid like that to not, I'm not going to do treatment plan? Hope, sympathy, guilt, and fear. The promise, the handshake. When that kid, who did die, when I talked to that parent, and I'll never forget that because he was so sincere about it. And he said, I looked my son in the eye and I shook his hand. And he gave me a sincere promise that my kid would not break that promise. I know it. The dad so desperately wanted to have the hope that the situation was going to turn out okay. And I'm sure that kid did regret overdosing. Who wouldn't? But it doesn't matter. He was trying to apply a rational solution to an emotional problem. He has an emotional problem. It isn't as simple as I'll never do it again. So, guilt, hope, sympathy, and fear. In general, the purpose of using emotions to train other people is it does a few things. Not necessarily the purpose, but it actually does things. And the thing that happens is you got to understand that I am addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, and situations and responsibilities. This is my little comfortable bubble. That's me. It's, I think, whatever. Somebody beat me up, I think, on the face there. So uncomfortable consequences are heading my way. And what I am doing is, as my ability to confront uncomfortable things is going down, this bubble is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. It is a protective wall that protects me, and it's usually filled with family members, spouses, and people running gauntlet. And they are all absorbing the negative consequences. Arrows are being shot at me. My mother is getting hit with these arrows. She is getting and suffering the negative consequences, whereas I am sitting in this comfortable bubble, and she says, you should step out here and get hit with these arrows, and I'm fine right where I'm at. I'm in the rehab with mom, the most comfortable rehab on the planet, sitting on the couch, explaining to you why tomorrow is going to be a better day. And in terms of that therapy and that treatment and that suggestions, do you guys have a drug court program around here in Lake County? Yeah, drug court. I think drug court programs are really cool. I don't know what yours is like, 18 months, they're difficult. But I'm going to tell you, treatment and recovery are not a crapshoot. Those that make the uncomfortable sacrifices and follow the suggestions are usually the ones that do pretty well. Those that design their own comfortable treatment plans are usually the ones that fail, and they blame you, or mom, or the drug buddy that showed up and brought them drugs, or the halfway house they were living at, and some guy brought drugs, or I can't help it that I was 5 minutes late, and all the wonderful stories that I have told. You know, so it causes people to enable. When I emotionally hijack people, it causes people to enable and give me some form of comfort, a hug, money, assistance. I will pay, you know what, David, we don't want you to lose your house. We'll pay just this one time. I'll drive you to work. You don't have a car. We don't want you to stress out. One of the biggest issues with families is when somebody gets sober, they're so afraid they're going to use that they begin to provide a very comfortable path for fear that if it is too difficult for the addict, they will relapse. I see it's the opposite. It's like, now that he just got out of rehab, you know, we're going to have to maybe look into getting him a car so that he can drive to work. It's like, get him a car. Don't get him a car. He's going to stay with us, and we don't want to push him. Because if we stress him out, he'll storm out and he'll use. So they create this comfortable path of recovery, which is all about avoidance. So give a substance abuser some form of comfort. Second is cause people to enable and absorb negative consequences for a substance abuser. Most people absorb my negative consequences for me. The third thing, cause people to enable and assume my responsibilities for me. You don't know how many times my father sat me down and said, here's what we're going to do, David. I want you to turn your paycheck over to me, okay? And we're going to create 2 bank accounts. One is going to be the house fund. I want you to one day have your own house, so we're going to put money away for house. It's like I got like 3 days clean and sober, and he's like developing the house fund plan for me, but Dad really wants me to succeed. The second, we're going to pay your bills for you, and I'm going to help you with this, and we're going to go over this every Wednesday. And he's paying my bills for me, and he's assuming the role of financial manager. Remember when I said I was retired? I really was. I had a laundry lady and a financial manager that I just turned my paycheck over, and he paid all my bills for me. And actually was a little bit of an investor because he had a house fund bank account that he did all the work for. He even opened my bills for me, I think. The uncomfortable process of opening, figuring out how I'm going to pay, he did it all. I'm in a protective bubble, and they thought I was on the path to getting better, and I'm on the path of getting worse. Fourth, cause people to enable and assume the actual responsibility of the addiction through guilt. It was my fault. If I had not yelled at poor David, he would not have stormed off. Train people to not to intervene, confront, or allow the substance abuser to feel their own consequences. Interventions when I show up. Everybody thinks the family is on my side. The family is not on my side. The family is, even though they're on my side, they are all surrounding, emotionally connected to the addict. And you cannot go, you have to do it in such a way because the family is trained. The family is really, really trained to protect that addict in some form of comfort. So the addict is little king and all little pawns of the family, and this is what you have to get through. I'm going to read you this letter. This letter is from an addict, and we have rules. Everything we do in an intervention is for a reason. The reason we read letters is because there's no two-way communication. We don't allow them to emotionally hijack. The reason I exist is because they can't emotionally hijack me. So basically, this is a letter that it went to tough love, which is we let them have their addiction out of the go. You're kicked out, have your addiction, call us when the enjoyment's over. And they usually try the primary enabler. They try mom first. They're calling, and the rule is don't answer mom. Then they try texting, and mom don't text back. So this one was sneaky, and she did the email, and it's pretty cool. And and she's allowed us to use it, and I'm going to read it, and I want you to understand that what she's saying isn't what she's saying. She is only hitting 4 emotions: hope, guilt, sympathy, or fear, to cause mom to enable her. And that is really what she's saying. There is a message underneath the words. Mom, you never listened to me, guilt, right? So I had to write this email so you might actually understand what it is I'm trying to say to you. You probably won't listen to anything that I say, which is guilt, right? And will just keep listening to some counselor guy who has never met me and doesn't even know me. Doubt is fear. She's going to plant a lot of doubt. Doubt, you did the wrong thing, you're going down the wrong thing, that's fear. Why did you have to bring the whole family and some stranger into my house? That's big guilt and sympathy. If you had only come to me, I would listen, but no, you had to do things like you always do and screw everything up. Now I will never trust you again. Again, guilt, right? How can I after Friday? How can I believe you when you were lies? Can you even understand how embarrassing that was to me? Big, big sympathy and guilt. Can you understand how embarrassing this was to me? Why would someone ever humiliate someone they say that they love? I never said I wouldn't go to treatment. Hope. Never said I wouldn't go to treatment. I just think that shipping me out to California just to get rid of me is pointless. I have 2 friends that went to rehab and they're still getting high. How do you know anything about this place? Doubt, 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 which is fear. Some counselor guy told you he doesn't even know me, just wants your money. I said I'm willing to see a therapist. Hope. So why can't I just stay here in Canton and go to outpatient? Hope. You can drug test me if you want. Hope. Why does it always have to be your way? You don't understand anything about drugs. You think you know me, but you don't. You don't even know your own family. Why don't you intervene on Josh and his pot smoking, which is cool. And what about Dad and his drinking? How nice that he actually shows up for the first time in his life and confronts me about my life. Nice move, Dad, have another drink. These are big, big sympathy, guilt, bam. So I just wanted you to know that it didn't have to be this way. I will never, 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 never go to California. I would rather die on the streets homeless. Big fear. I would rather die on the streets homeless. If you ever had your 19-year-old daughter say, I'd rather die on the streets homeless, it's kind of you're not thrilled about that conversation. I'd rather die on the streets homeless than get on a effing plane with some stranger. And you do this now, you know I just lost my job and broke up with Joe. Big sympathy, sympathy. How dare you do this when I'm at my lowest, when I need you the most, you abandon me. Guilt, sympathy. And that letter you read to me, nice try, you won't accept my calls, you don't want me around. Well, how is this? I don't need any of you, and I don't want any of you in my life. If you ever want to talk, don't bother, because the only problem that I have in my life is my family. So this is a big, huge regret. You just did the wrong thing. Fear, fear. Goodbye, it didn't have to be this way. I said I'd get help, just not your way. Have a great life. Love, Jen. And by the way, her real name wasn't Jen. Jen is the name of an ex-girlfriend of mine who dumped me, so I decided to immortalize her name here forever. And so what is Jen really saying here? Jen is not saying any of what she just said. Jen is a composer, and all she is saying is guilt, hope, sympathy, or fear. And Mom, if she does not have a support group of us around her, on her own, will eventually begin to feel these feelings, and when one hits a high enough level, she will be compelled to find out a solution to make the crisis go away for her daughter. She will call. So, what really happens on an intervention? Well, the internet, I got this picture from the internet says this is what happens, which is, I've never actually seen an intervention really look like that. She's really happy, I think, to be there and stuff like that, but that's what the internet says. It also, this is Sopranos, when they got the big fight intervention. Some people think, a lot of people think it's like that. Well, he's going to act this way. They try to pre-decide what is going to happen in this intervention. Most people think that an intervention is a divine moment. I don't necessarily mean a godly or spiritual or religious moment. They feel that one day their loved one will hit this mysterious bottom and they will magically get better as a result of, who knows? Maybe he got arrested last time, that the universe itself will one day magically make it happen, as opposed to something that we can have an influence in. An intervention is really about like this, and it's 12 Angry Men. And 12 Angry Men is story Henry Fonda, basically 12 jurors. They just come into the room, they take a vote, and everybody says guilty, 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 except for Henry Fonda, who has a doubt. So he's the one jury holdout. And the movie, Henry Fonda then begins to hijack everybody's emotions one at a time until eventually people have enough doubt and flip. And at the end, the vote is everybody says not guilty. An intervention is really about like that. Is that an addict will slowly, one family member at a time, get them on their side so that they believe that they are now on the path of righteousness. When that family kicked me out over in New Jersey or New York, they really did believe that they were now on the right path, a better path than a 6-month halfway house and a residential treatment program. They knew in their heart they were now on a better path. And as a result, they were creating a little comfortable bubble for our buddy Joe. So what is it that everybody has in common? You know, all these people, accountability, responsibility, transparency, honesty, and sobriety, and the fundamental common thing is they are all addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, things, situations, and responsibilities. And that creates most of their problems in life, drunk or sober. And only if they walk through the uncomfortable parts of their life will they eventually gain emotional maturity, and they will increase responsibility, accountability, and all these things. And so basically I'm going to end with this. To understand addiction recovery and enabling in a little bit of a different way is tell a story. It's just a hypothetical story. It's a strange story. But I tell it to all the families that I talk to. And basically it's like this. So I work a lot of hours, and it was a long commute for me to get here. It was like 2.5 hours, I think. And somewhere along the line, I came up with this really cool idea, because I'm grandiose in my thinking. I still got that addict kind of mentality. And I was realizing that I'm stressed out lately. I'm going to take some time off. And about an hour into the drive, I'm now going to take some time off. I'm like preparing for a wedding, and I'm stressed out. After the wedding, I'm going to take a year off. I've saved a little bit of money. I'm going to take a year off. And right when I was pulling in, I'm not only taking a year off. I'm an addict. Let me run with it. I'm gonna literally do nothing. I'm going to stay in bed for a year. I will not even leave my bed, because when I set my mind to do something, I'm going to do it. And you think I'm crazy, but I'm going to do it. I'm going to stay in bed for a year. I'm going to hire home health care people to come and like change me, because like I'm seriously not leaving that bed. I'm going to have Meals on Wheels come to feed me. I've got books. I got e-books. I got a video game. Of course I do. I got an Xbox. I got two. I got an Xbox One and an Xbox. I got TV, laptop, e-books. I got it all. So I'm going to do this, right? Starting tomorrow, or after the wedding. I'll give my soon-to-be wife a little whatever. She's going to be thrilled with this plan, I'm sure. So I'm going to do it. So fast forward after the wedding, I jump into my bed and I plop myself in there and I don't get out. If you know anything about people that are bedridden, regardless of their intentions, they are going to go through changes. And I don't care how much food or how much people come visit me, I'm going to go through changes. And fast forward a few months, my muscles will begin to atrophy, and I will begin to get weaker and weaker and weaker. Fast forward 6 months, my heart rate, respiration, and blood pressure is going to start to decrease as a result of my lifestyle choice. And fast forward 9 months, if I even tried to get out of bed, I'd probably pass out. Fast forward a year. My mother, who has not seen me in a year, comes rushing to my house. And she comes up the stairs and she opens the door. And, well, I haven't really showered, and it's like, whoa, jeez. David. And she looks at me laying on the bed, scrawny and pale as can be, and she sees a little bowl of soup that the Meals on Wheels people had given me, and she sees me with a little spoon, and my hands are trembling because I'm weak. And she says, oh my goodness, David, look at how weak you are, look at how, and she rushes to my side and sits at the edge of my bed, and she says, look at how weak you are. Even your hands are shaking. Put your hand down, I'll feed you. And the last muscle that I had been using with the spoon, I put down to my side, right? And I lay it on my side, and she grabs my spoon and begins to feed me. And she has given me attention and love and prayers and food, all healthy things. And she has now accelerated a process that I had begun a year before. And eventually I am just going to fade away. What does my mother really need to do? What my mother needs to do is the exact opposite of her maternal instinct. She needs to take that bowl of soup and go to the end of the room and put it in the windowsill. And if she does that, there is going to be a consequence, as I am an expert at hijacking my mother's emotions, and I will cause her to feel more discomfort than she probably ever has in her life. And I will first hit her with guilt. What kind of mother, like seriously, what, are you drunk again? Like seriously, what kind of mother would do this to me? Like really, this is my house, number one. So I don't know where you're coming from or whatever this is. You're trying to pay me back for all those years or whatever. I'm sober now. I should pick up a drink. So I'll hit her with guilt. And if my mom remains firm and doesn't budge on the guilt, I will then hit her with sympathy. You think okay, I screwed up. Okay, I screwed up, but look at me. I can't even get out of bed. I'm so weak. I would give anything to be able to get out of this bed. Please, just understand, like, I can't. I'm sorry I screwed up. I'm sorry I screwed up. Just please, sympathy. And if she remains firm and doesn't budge, I'm going to hit her with hope. I swear to you tomorrow, we'll get like a personal trainer, a physical therapist, come over, just give me the food. I'm getting hungry. I'm hungry. Please, I swear to you, I swear on Nana's grave that I will start tomorrow. I'll do anything. Just give me the food. And if my mom remains firm, I'll hit her with fear, then fine, I will just die. And I want you to know whose fault it is. Which, by the way, is a phrase I've actually said to my mother. And I want you to know whose fault it is. Guilt. One final fear and guilt. And if my mom remains firm, sooner or later, the discomfort, because I'm addicted to avoiding uncomfortable feelings, the discomfort of getting out of bed will be less than the discomfort of staying in bed. And I will roll my butt out of bed, cussing her out along the way, and I will begin to crawl slowly across the floor, wakening muscles that I haven't used in a year. And for the first time in a year, I'm actually getting stronger rather than weaker, even though it doesn't feel like it. And it will be a miserable experience, and I will punish my mom every crawl of the way. But over time, sooner or later, if my mom puts that bowl of soup on that windowsill every day, I will be able to walk over there on my own, and I will beat her up along the way to get there. Maybe one day I'll thank her for it, but maybe not. And that is what my mother needs to do, and that's what family systems need to do. And that's kind of what interventions are really about. People think it's about us coming out there and talking them into treatment. That's a small piece. Teaching a family how to take the soup bowl and put it on the windowsill is the hardest part of the job, and it's something that you guys probably have tried to do or wished you could do in a million different ways. So I think that's pretty much it. I think I'm right there. I think, did I run a little bit over? I apologize for that if I did. Thank you so much for everything, and that was the presentation. And there's some little books, I think, that they pass around that have a little bit of the emotional hijacking and things. If you guys have any questions or anything like that, it was an absolute honor to be here, and it's amazing. It's an honor to stand me. 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought of it. I'm just going to say, but it's pretty cool being on this side of the fence today. And so thank you all for everything that you do, and that's pretty much it.